be reminded that we don't need to solve other people's problems. We can't take their pain away, but that when we offer ourselves up with an open heart without any goal or expectation, that it's such a gift when we're actually available to that. And sometimes we're available, sometimes we're not.
Hello, and welcome to Not Born Yesterday, a podcast dedicated to older adults and the challenges and joys of aging. I'm Miriam Goodman. Not Born Yesterday examines the problems and solutions of growing older today. We bring you the wisdom and voices of experts in the field of aging and offer tips on how to feel your best, use your lifetime skills and experience, and make the coming months and years as fulfilling as possible.
I'm Lynn Winter Gross. Not Born Yesterday is brought to you by Next Village San Francisco, a local nonprofit providing older adults with support to help age in place.
Today on Not Born Yesterday, we're tackling a topic that is both sensitive and difficult. What happens when older widows and widowers decide they want companionship again? Whether it's been years or months, many older adults worry that they may think it is too soon or that adult children will see it as a betrayal.
To help us understand the dilemma is therapist Robyn Blum. Robyn runs workshops on grief and bereavement for the Jewish Family and Children's Service in San Francisco, and she sees many people who are conflicted when it comes to re-entering social life after a loss. Robyn, welcome to Not Born Yesterday.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here with both of you.
Well, let's start with the basics. Do widows and widowers often think they are betraying their late spouse or partner if they start dating again? Are they judged by others who think they have to keep on grieving? How do you help someone with all those feelings?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And as a starting point, and I'll probably say this more than once, it so much depends on so many factors. And what I hope we can really tackle is the understanding that it is such an individually driven decision of what someone wants and when they're available for a new relationship. But to take a step back and say, yes, like this does come up, the guilt and the sense of betrayal and the perception of too soon, worrying about their adult children, what they will think. So yeah, we hear that a lot, and we often just are in conversation with folks to understand and unpack when they're actually available to engage. We've seen folks who are dating after 2 months, and we see folks who wait years and then seemingly out of nowhere decide maybe, in fact, they'd like to try again, which is very surprising. So we've seen the range of folks jumping back into relationships.
Wanting companionship doesn't erase the love that you had for your partner. It's more like reconnecting with life. And of course, re-entering social life doesn't necessarily mean dating. If someone wants a social life, do you suggest that clients start small by joining group activities or reconnecting first with older friends?
Well, I think that it really is about finding connection. So there's no right or wrong here. What I think about when people are grieving, they tend to have not to be overly generalizing, but there potentially can be one of the symptoms of grief is a depressed mood. It's having less energy. They're fatigued. So to be able to jump in and go out and make a whole bunch of new friends and new connections when you're feeling like you've lost part of yourself, you feel basically, internal. You become more internal in the grief process is very much what we see. So if we energetically are inside of ourselves and with our grief, it's really hard to put that energy out there. Like even under our best circumstances to go out and make a new friend at any point in life, but especially as we age. So I often see that people tend to either rely on old friends, people they've known, people they're really comfortable with, or often I hear that people find another person who comes into their life who is on a parallel track of where they're at in their grief, and they find a camaraderie and being able to to share and not feel like they're oversharing or overburdening, but there's a mutuality of a relationship that really is very much about the recent loss.
I know people who've met future partners in the grief group.
Ah, yes, I have heard that. I have not actually seen it in our groups yet, but it is. I've heard that that does happen. I think it's an interesting phenomena, and I'll just conjecture here that when we hold our grief groups and we aim to create a safe space, the safe space of a grief group is sometimes we hear that it's an unusual experience because really we come from a place of non-judgment and holding all of the experiences, the good of a relationship, the challenges of a relationship in a way that, again, we're not judging it. We don't bring blame into it. We really just hold the entirety of what it is to have these human relationships and these experiences. And in doing so, I think people feel more comfortable being vulnerable and being open. And I think that probably lends itself to people having an opportunity to see each other from a lens that sometimes in our more, the niceties of social interactions, that they don't go to that depth. So I totally could see why people really get to see and know each other when they're participating in a grief group together.
It sounds almost ideal because the other person knows exactly how you're feeling and you can empathize. But I'm thinking about these older adults who try to go online dating. And first of all, it's difficult, and so many people misrepresent themselves and send pictures that are 20 years old and ask for money, all the things that we've heard about. I just wonder when somebody does enter into these semi-relationships at the beginning, how do they prepare for rejection? What if somebody says, "Oh, I don't think this is right for us"?
So the process of dating is an interesting one, and that's really what we're in the realm of dating. And though we're talking about older adults, I would say that I would first start by saying, I don't think it really changes. I think that dating, if you're in your 20s or if you're in your 80s, it's a way of taking a risk, opening up to the possibility of meeting someone new. And in a way, there's information there. So, information that we get when we get to spend time with another person. So, one thing I will say is that one way to prepare yourself for the possibility of it not working out or feeling rejected is that every date we go on is an experience. And that the relationship that we have on that coffee date might be the entirety of the relationship. So make it a good one. Enjoy yourself, bring yourself forward. And really, if you can try and banish the idea that you're really having to make some kind of goal. The only goal of dating in the beginning, right, is to decide if you enjoy being with that person. So it's a much about seeing if you enjoy being with them, if you have some things to talk about, is there openness, is there curiosity, is there mutuality? And when rejection comes, we sometimes can just invite it as really good information that it wasn't the right fit. And especially as we get older and we know the preciousness of time and energy, don't want to spend time with people who are not our right people.
We know people who have experienced dating differently after they're widowed. Some say, I took care of my former partner a long time, and I don't want to do that again. And some say, I took care of my partner for a long time, and yeah, it was worth it. I would do that again. So everybody's different in terms of how they feel about dating. And what do you advise in this situation?
So what I advise in that situation is to start when it feels like there's actually a relationship starting, that there should be some conversation about what the expectation would be. Some folks who date later in life are, as you're saying, are absolutely willing and feel the commitment to care for another person. And then there are people who absolutely do not want to be in that position again. And what better information can you get, right? To get to know another person is to see if there's agreement about what that expectation would be. And I know that probably it seems like maybe a very heavy conversation to have as you're getting to know someone, but I guess I just want to encourage lightening things up a bit because it's just the reality of life. And as you know, as we get older, we see more clearly the reality of what can happen. I think about 20-year-olds having their first few dates, and I'm guessing they're not having the conversation of what would happen if one of us was impaired or had a terrible accident or what would, but the truth is that could happen then too. So with our age and our wisdom is to actually not shy away from things that are maybe scary or, daunting, but to really know like who is this person? How do they see caretaking? Do they have the means to have someone else care for themselves if God forbid something happens? Or are they having the expectation that you will be their primary caretaker? Do they have other family? So these are really important conversations to have. And we really, again, I really want to sort of frame it in the realm of, isn't it nice to get to know someone and what they think?
You mentioned that it's an experience and whatever works, but have you ever heard anyone in a group say, I don't want to have to say goodbye again?
Oh, that's a very big one, isn't it? Right? As if we can protect ourselves from having to say goodbye again. And yes, I have heard it. I've heard the tenderness around how deeply painful it is to say goodbye. And I often think about saying goodbye is the decision that do we want to love again? Right? That really is the fundamental question that we're asking when we consider whether or not we're willing to say goodbye again is, am I ready and willing to love again? And that is a question that everybody has to come to their own position on, right? Is it worth the risk? Because the risk is, it's not even a hypothetical risk. Like we always have to say goodbye.
And
But
how do you advise somebody to know the answer to that? Am I ready to love again?
well, that it really is something that everyone has to come to on their own, right? I start by really just wanting to acknowledge that the protection of the fear of having to say goodbye again, that's a perfectly okay position to take. Like if you really don't want to invest yourself in that possibility, then there is no judgment in deciding that you're happy on your own and that you're not willing. And again, perfectly okay, right? We have other people in our lives. We have a primary relationship, maybe a companion who's the primary person, but there's a richness of life and other people that we can turn to if the vulnerability is too much. So if that's the truth of the situation, then we hold that with tenderness.
Society sends a mixed message about widowhood, and we can't forget that there are often family dynamics involved in this. So grief affects the whole family. So if, let's say, a husband has died, the adult children have lost their father. And they might say to mom, we're still grieving. We're not ready for you to go out and date. So I also, I guess sometimes they're suspicious. Are you sure this man's really interested in you and not interested in your money or things like that? So, how do you, as a grieving person who wants to join society again, how do you balance the relationship between what you want and working with your adult children?
Right, yeah. So I would say first and foremost, that again, this is just so much telling about the relationship between the widow or widower and their adult children. And I think there's so much gentleness and compassion that comes into these conversations. I think that often I hear that adult children are suspicious of other people who may be interested in their parent. But if I sort of put that aside for a moment, and the concerns that your adult children express, can you meet their concerns in a conversation? Do you really want to hear what they have to say? Which isn't to say that we want them to necessarily influence or control the situation. But as you point out, it's really delicate to know that, mom or dad has the right to enjoy their life, to seek companionship, to find love, to care and be cared for. Uh, and how hard that is sometimes, depending on the relationship of the adult children with the spouse that has passed, with the relationship with that parent. They're very complicated dynamics. And so it's a new chapter in a family's life. So the question becomes, how do you balance all of this, right? And there's no solution that can be just like decided overnight. It's a process. So I would say be sensitive to your adult children, be sensitive to their loss. What's difficult also, though, in that is that when you've lost a spouse, especially in a long-term marriage, the impact on you personally is very, very great, as you know. Like all domains of your life are changed forever. And you have to look towards a new chapter. And just the same way, like losing a parent has a very different flavor of what has changed in your life. So I think maybe there's a conversation there about what has changed, what are the concerns, and just to really be able to take care of one another, which is sometimes very challenging because the grief is so different, right? We're not, even though you're grieving the same person, you're grieving a very different role and the way that person fit into your life. So I think again, just to bring up those conversations and the concerns and to hopefully deepen the connection we have with our adult children in the process of moving forward into a new chapter.
I've heard of conversations of the adult children saying, "Sure, Dad, I want you to be happy, but how can you go on and replace mom? You can't replace mom."
Well, of course, that's true, right? So I think I'd like to meet that comment with the absolute truth of it. I am not looking to replace your mother because we all know that's an absolute impossibility. But what I am hoping for is an opportunity to love again. And that feels very important. But again, not to diminish in any way the love that was had by the spouse that's been lost. And we never replace people. That's just not the way it works. And the love we feel for someone we lost just gets carried forward in life. It doesn't go away, no matter how long they've been gone.
So, in your groups, people probably are at different stages of grieving and maybe even at different stages of dating. Is there a boundary about what you talk about?
I'll just start by saying when we're working in a grief group, absolutely, we sometimes have people who are in, well, we always have people who are in different places in their process of their grief and where they're at and how the transformation has happened. So if somebody comes in and they announce that they've started dating, then I think the group wants to hear about that as the hopeful possibility of what will emerge in the future. And we don't dwell there in the group because the group is actually intended to work with grief. So though it comes in as a possibility for the future, which is often what we want to work towards, that it's really not the place to really talk about your new girlfriend because we've agreed as a group that the focus is on taking this time every week so that you can be with and process and share your grief. While we still also don't discourage hopefulness, of course, because this is really what the work of doing, the work of actually doing good grief and actually mourning someone is that it does in fact prepare you to take their memory and be able to move forward, right? So when we get stuck in our grief, it becomes one of the barriers of actually seeking out what is new and what is possible in life again. So we have to balance out someone coming in with like that breakthrough of possibility of what's next, while also allowing the group to be able to be with the task at hand, which is to mourn the loss of the people we no longer have.
What's the advantage of a grief group for somebody who's mourning?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing we can say about grief groups is I want to make distinction between grief and mourning. And grief is what we carry inside of ourselves. Like we're walking around in our society, and nobody would know particularly that you're walking around with your grief. It's invisible, really. So the process of mourning is an actual process. It can be done alone, with journaling or being very intentional, conjuring up memories, writing, or doing art. There's so many ways we can do that. But mourning is really not intended to be done in isolation, that we need witness. We need shared humanity. This is, to my mind, you know, our grief and our experience of loss and death is one of the most universal things we experience as human beings. And I don't know that you can fully go it alone. So the process of coming into a grief group is really surrounding yourself with a community where you are one voice and one experience in a community that can provide a well-rounded experience of all the facets of what people are experiencing. And especially when people are in different places, day to day, week to week, and they are essentially weaving a tapestry of all the ways grief hits us, and to go through that mourning process with witness, with connection, with care, with concern, that we're not alone in our process. So I have seen beautiful connections happen in grief groups, where people continue to meet. They have the commonality of their grief, but then they find other ways that they're connected and decide to continue meeting.
I want to ask you, for people who start dating, how much should they share about their former spouse? I assume it's easy just to keep talking about Joe did this and Joe did that, and it's like enough about Joe. I'm on a date with you, and. But I assume that people want to talk about their former spouses a lot, and that's kind of hard with the dating.
Yeah, I think there's probably a way to distinguish between like being the sole focus of a conversation, right? And we all know what that looks like and how that feels. There's, I think, a beautiful art to not shying away from grief when it shows up. And, I think there's a certain capacity that you can develop, right? As someone, if you have the intention for yourself of wanting to be supportive in death and that experience of other people. And it's sometimes we talk actually in our group about things that people can often say that is really intended to be kind, but it can just feel like it's shutting someone down. And I think that's a lot of what happens. So I wonder in the situation, right? If there's just trying to find out if there's an opening, are you someone who can listen to me? Are you willing? And just to be reminded that we don't need to solve other people's problems. We can't take their pain away, but that when we offer ourselves up with an open heart without any goal or expectation, that it's such a gift when we're actually available to that. And sometimes we're available, sometimes we're not.
So if someone's listening today and decides, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to add a new person to my life. I can take it. Well, so what should they do first?
Well, I think that, like you said, that first step is to actually express willingness. I'm a firm believer in talking about it, like being able to speak it into existence in this world. Like you just tell other people I think I'm really ready to meet someone. And there's something about just engaging in that process at the beginning. And then you can find ways to get yourself out into the world and find things that interest you, go to meetups, go to a class. Just the more we move through the world, following the threads of what is interesting to us, it's more likely that you're going to put someone in your path that you're going to want to possibly consider taking on a date, going on a date with, spending some time with.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all this information. I hope adult children and their parents have learned something new and understand the pros and cons of love after loss. Thank you, Robyn Blum.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Today on News You Can Use, we're talking about robots. Robot-assisted surgery might sound like a plot right out of a science fiction novel, but the truth is this technology has been around since the 1980s. You may know someone having surgery performed by a robot or had robotic surgery yourself. Did you wonder what was really going on? Where's the human surgeon? Can the robots do it all on their own? First, you should know robots do not take over surgery. Instead, they're used to complement and assist human surgeons. Surgical robots are a tool that enhances a surgeon's abilities, offering greater precision and dexterity for certain tasks. While robotic devices definitely have a role in surgery, they lack the human judgment necessary for complex decision-making and patient care.
So how are robots used in surgery, and what's the advantage? Usually, a robotic surgery system includes a camera arm and a mechanical arm with surgical instruments attached. The human surgeon controls the arms while seated near the operating table. The surgeon can look at a magnified high-definition 3D view of the surgical site on the screen and then can effectively lead the other team members who assist in the operation. Surgical robots are not autonomous. They rely on human operators for guidance and continuous judgment during a procedure. The surgeon always controls the robot's actions and can take over completely if needed. Robotic surgery is often done through tiny openings in the skin and other tissue. It's minimally and invasive surgery. The benefits include fewer complications, less pain and blood loss, shorter hospital stay, quicker recovery, and smaller, less notable scars.
So, should we worry that robots will completely replace surgeons someday? No, surgery will still rely on continuing direction by surgeons. The role of the entire surgical team extends beyond the operation itself to include pre- and post-operative care where human interaction is always vital. Robotic surgery isn't an option for everyone or for every type of surgery. Talk with your doctor about the benefits and risks. Ask how it compares with other types of minimally invasive surgery and why it might be appropriate for your needs.
And that's our podcast for today. Our thanks go to our guest Robyn Blum of Jewish Family and Children's Services. You can learn more about Next Village San Francisco at their website, nextvillagesf.org, or call them at 415-888-2868. Our theme music is from Hook Sounds, and Jason Dahlstadt is our engineer. And we thank you for listening. We'd love to hear what you would like us to discover and discuss. Please contact us at notbornyesterdaypodcast.org. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. They're all free and they let us know our audience better. Be well, stay strong, and remember, you weren't born yesterday. I'm Lynn Winter-Gross.
And I'm Miriam Goodman.